Hey everyone, and welcome back to Retro Legends. In the mid-80s, the video game industry had just gone through a huge crash that almost wiped out video games completely. In the United States, the console market was seen as dead, unreliable, and just plain bad. But in Japan, a new generation of game systems was about to come out. These systems would bring video games back into homes and, more importantly, change how we thought about them. On one side, there was Nintendo, with a careful, controlled, almost bossy way of doing things. On the other side was Sega, more aggressive, more about technology, and more focused on arcade-style games. The NES versus Master System wasn't just a console war, it was a clash of ideas, business plans, and totally different views on what home video games should be. And most importantly, it was a battle fought differently in every part of the world. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for more trips into the world of retro gaming. Let's get started. The crash of 1983 wasn't just a money problem. It completely broke the trust between the video game industry and the people who bought games. Stores had warehouses full of game systems they couldn't sell. Customers thought video games were cheap and all the same. And the idea of having a game system at home seemed like a passing fad that was now over. So, the big problem wasn't selling a new game system. It was convincing people that buying a game system was a smart idea again. Nintendo knew that if they showed up as just another video game company, it would be a disaster. So their plan was almost like a big business move. They wanted to make the Famicom seem like a general entertainment device. They highlighted cool accessories like robots and light guns, and gave it a look that felt more like a regular electronic gadget than an old game system. The NES wasn't introduced as a better version of Atari or Coleco. It was a completely new idea. Not just games, but controlled entertainment. This way, Nintendo could get back into stores without directly bringing up the bad memories of the crash. Sega, on the other hand, had to deal with a totally different situation. When the Master System came to the West, Nintendo had already cleared the path, but they had also put up fences. Their licensing deals, special agreements with stores, and control over making game cartridges had created a closed system. Getting in wasn't about having a better product, but about playing by Nintendo's rules. So, the Master System entered a market that was technically open again, but Nintendo had already taken over. The competition wasn't just about the game system itself anymore. It was about the business and contract rules that supported it. The rules Nintendo set weren't just strict, they were a whole system. Limiting how many games could be released each year, making sure all cartridges were made in Nintendo factories, and getting every game approved beforehand, these things were all meant to stop the problems that caused the crash in the first place. The seal of quality wasn't about making sure games were good art, it was a business fence. It cut down on the number of games, made sure everything was made the same way, and pushed the financial risk onto the game makers. They had to spend money up front without knowing if their game would sell well. What came out of this was a stable, predictable, and very controlled system. Nintendo decided when games came out, how much they cost, and how much people saw them. This system had a major side effect. It made the NES brand itself more important than any single game. For the public, the Nintendo name meant quality. But for game developers, it meant they were tied to Nintendo. Being forced to make games only for Nintendo stopped games from going to other systems. This made the competition's game selection look smaller, even if their hardware was technically good. Sega, on the other hand, had a totally different idea. One that came from its arcade roots. The Master System was designed to be less strict. Game developers had more freedom and could release games faster. This led to lots of arcade games being brought over and allowed for new ideas that Nintendo might have rejected or delayed. However, without such tight control, the games available were a mixed bag. There were great games, but also mediocre ones, and consumers couldn't easily tell the difference. So, Nintendo gave up freedom for stability, while Sega gave up consistency for variety. This wasn't just a difference in ideas, but a fundamental choice that shaped how both systems were seen for that whole generation. When it came to just the hardware, Sega had the upper hand. The Master System had a higher resolution, a wider range of colors, and could handle sprites more flexibly. This meant sharper pictures, colors that looked better, and visuals that really reminded you of the arcade games back then. That was a big strength for Sega. In direct ports, especially those made by Sega themselves, the difference was often clear. More detailed backgrounds, less flickering, and smoother animations. The NES, on the other hand, started with more limited tech, especially with colors and how it handled many sprites at once. But these limits forced a strict way of designing games. Nintendo developers and the teams who always worked on the hardware learned to design with every limitation in mind, turning them into a design choice. Limited colors meant strong, instantly recognizable visual styles. Smaller sprites made things easier to see and understand what was happening. Even flickering, when it happened, was often hidden by clever ways of timing and arranging the scene. So the difference wasn't just about power, but about the relationship between the hardware and the software. Sega offered more technical room to play with, but it was up to the developers to use it. Nintendo, however, built a system where the limits were known, studied, and shared, allowing for faster learning and more consistent results. Over time, this led to a strange situation. A machine that was clearly less powerful seemed to outdo itself with every new game. In short, the Master System showed what the hardware could do. The NES showed what you could achieve despite the hardware. And it was this difference that played a key part in how the public saw the two consoles. When we compare the NES and the Master System, the gameplay was the most important thing, much more than how powerful they were or how many colors they could show on screen. Nintendo built its whole identity on one clear idea. Games had to be easy to control, easy to understand, and always make sense. Every new game idea was brought in slowly, and every level was made to teach the player something without needing to tell them directly. This led to games that looked simple at first, but had a lot of depth, all about timing, being exact, and getting really good at them. Super Mario Bros. Didn't tell you the rules. It showed them to you, making the level design itself a way of talking. Sega took a different path, one that came straight from arcade games. Master System games were often more direct, more intense, and sometimes harder. The action started right away, with less of a gentle start and a much steeper learning curve. This made them exciting and fun for quick playtimes, but not as good for long, planned adventures. Games like Alex Kidd, Wonder Boy, or Shinobi offered tough challenges and a clear identity, but they rarely had that perfect balance that turned a good game into an all-time classic. The difference was in how they did things. Nintendo designed games by thinking about the player first, how they move, what they see, what they understand at every moment. Sega designed games by thinking about the action first, speed, pressure, quick reactions. Neither way was wrong, but one turned out to be a better fit for the home gaming market that was just starting. People started to think of the NES as having well-made, dependable, and polished games, while the Master System felt a bit rougher, more powerful, but not as refined for long-term play. This feeling didn't come from just one game, but from everything being consistent. Game after game, Nintendo made people believe that NES games were carefully planned, tested, and polished down to the smallest detail. Sega offered variety and technical strength, but not the same steady quality. And it was this difference, more than any technical specs, that decided who won that generation. How they handled their main characters was another big difference between the NES and Master System. And again, the difference wasn't about being creative, but about strategy. Nintendo treated Mario like a super important asset, not just one character. Every time he showed up, he followed clear rules. The same ways to control him, the same basic physics, the same look. Even when he was in a different setting or type of game, Mario was still easy to spot by how he moved, jumped, and reacted. This consistency built trust. People knew what to expect, but they were also excited to see how that familiar character would be used next. Sega, with Alex Kidd, didn't really have such a clear plan. The character was used more as a quick fix than as a long-term star. Each new game changed him up. Different gameplay, different feel, even the art style changed a lot. There wasn't a solid core to build the experience around. This made each game feel like its own thing, but it also stopped the character from becoming a lasting favorite in people's minds. The difference is small but super important. Mario wasn't just a main character, he was a promise of quality and consistency. Alex Kidd, though, felt like a character still trying to figure out who he was. Without a clear direction, Sega couldn't turn him into a widely recognized symbol, one that could stand for the whole Master System world. And in a market that was learning to recognize and follow brands, this lack of consistency mattered just as much, if not more, than any technical limits. The difference between the NES and Master System really showed up in how they handled their game libraries. Nintendo didn't just go for a huge number of games, they wanted careful growth. Their licensing system, even though it was strict, made sure games met certain standards for how they looked, how well they worked, and how they were presented. This greatly reduced the number of rushed or poorly made games. The result was a system where you knew what to expect. Even without knowing a specific game, people expected a certain level of quality. This feeling, built over time, made customers and stores trust Nintendo more. The Master System went in the opposite direction. Being open to more game makers and focusing on bringing arcade games to the console led to mixed results. Alongside some really good games which were often technically better than their NES versions, there were also too many similar games, rushed adaptations, and games that didn't really use the console's power. Not having strict rules meant the game library was more varied, but also less reliable overall. When we look at different parts of the world, the gap became even bigger. In Japan, the Master System never really took off. Nintendo's strong game characters, wide distribution, and constant support meant Sega stayed on the sidelines. But in Europe, and especially Brazil, things were different. Nintendo wasn't as aggressive there, and local distribution deals helped the Master System build a strong and lasting fan base. In those markets, the console wasn't seen as just another option, but as the main gaming system, lasting much longer than the NES. This difference in regions shows that comparing these two consoles isn't just about who won or lost overall. The NES won because of its consistency and tight control over its games. The Master System survived and did well where those same rules weren't as strong, proving that success depends just as much on the situation as it does on how good the games are. The sales numbers show a clear difference, but we need to look at them carefully. The about 62 million NES units sold show how well a global plan can work. This plan included launching early in North America, controlling how games were distributed, having a strong presence in stores, and always releasing new games made by Nintendo that kept sales going for years. The NES didn't suddenly shoot up in sales, but it grew steadily and constantly. This made the console a standard that everyone knew. The Master System, with about 13 million units, had a more broken-up journey. It came out late in North America, had weak advertising, and didn't have as good a distribution network as Nintendo. This really limited its first impact, stopping it from getting as many users as the NES. Globally, this delay was a big deal. The picture changes completely when you look at different regions. In Western Europe, Sega used a more aggressive plan that fit the area better. Good prices, frequent bundles, and less strict marketing helped the Master System gain ground, even beating the NES at different times, especially in the UK and some parts of Southern Europe. Here, people saw the product differently. The Master System was seen as a more modern machine, closer to the arcade experience. The case of Brazil is even more interesting. Thanks to working with Tectoy, the Master System wasn't treated like an imported console, but like a local product. Making it locally, translating and adapting games, giving constant support, and having affordable prices made the Sega machine a national standard. Its long life, with models and software released for decades, is unmatched in the history of home consoles. In short, Nintendo won the war because of its strong industry and global control. Sega, however, showed that success isn't always the same everywhere. In specific places, with targeted plans, the Master System not only held its own, but it dominated. And this makes the comparison much more complicated than what the total numbers might suggest. The difference between Nintendo and Sega wasn't just about technology or business. It was also deeply about how they talked to people. From the start, Nintendo built an image that felt safe and trustworthy. Games for everyone, parents could feel good about it, and you knew it would be good quality. The NES was seen as a safe product, good for families and kids, and also reliable for stores who really needed something they could count on after the crash in 1983. Everything about their brand, from the console's look to their ads, showed stability and order. Sega, on the other hand, chose to do the exact opposite. The Master System was shown as a more powerful machine, closer to what you'd find in an arcade, more technical. Their ads focused on better graphics, brighter colors, and games that were just like the arcade versions. This message was aimed at a slightly older audience, people who cared more about how well things performed than about the whole gaming world around it. But this way of thinking only worked where people were ready to hear it. The big problem for Sega was timing. Nintendo didn't just get there first, they took over people's minds. By the time Sega arrived, the rules were already set. Console meant NES. Good quality meant Nintendo. So Sega had to fight not just against a competitor, but against an idea that was already stuck in people's heads. Every good thing about the Master System was seen as just a slight change, not a whole new choice. Plus, Nintendo had already built strong relationships with distributors, stores, and game makers. This let them control what was on the shelves, how visible games were, and which games were available. Sega found itself trying to work in a system where the rules were already written and used by someone else. Even when they had a good product, they often didn't have the physical space or the mindshare to tell people about it effectively. Basically, Nintendo won the story battle even before they won the sales battle. Sega talked about power in a market that was looking for trust. And when trust has already been given to someone else, just being technically better isn't enough to change things. Sega made a big mistake in their plan that would end up being super important. They saw their game licenses as just a bonus, not the main thing that made their system work. Nintendo, though, figured out pretty early on that the real fight wasn't about the game machine itself, but about what people imagined and connected with. Mario, Zelda, Metroid, Donkey Kong weren't just popular games. They were worlds people recognized, stories that kept going, and they stayed the same over time. Each new game made the old ones more valuable, and most importantly, it made the NES a must-have. The Master System didn't have this ongoing connection. Sega had good characters and games, but they used them in a messy way. Alex Kidd never had a clear path. He changed game types, feelings, and how he played, so people couldn't really connect him to one solid idea. Other games and characters came and went without a long-term plan. The result was a list of games that looked good, but didn't have strong stories or characters to really push the system forward. Even inside the company, Sega couldn't build a team that made games as good as Nintendo's. Their teams were great at making arcade games work on home consoles, but they weren't as focused on making games just for home play. Nintendo, on the other hand, made games that only worked on the NES, using its limits and strengths really well. This made a clear difference. Nintendo games felt like they belonged, while Sega games often felt like they were just changed to fit. The timing also played a big part. The Master System came out when Nintendo had already decided what a game console should be after the big crash. A closed system, controlled, reliable, with characters everyone knew. Sega tried to come in with a different idea, but they didn't have enough time to teach the market, or the tools to change the rules. That's why the Master System should be seen more as a puzzle than a total failure. It was a good machine, often better with its technology, but it was part of a plan that focused on quick power instead of building value over time. It didn't lose because it was worse, but because it came out at the wrong time, with an idea that the market wasn't ready for anymore. The NES didn't just bring back trust in the market, it set the rules. License control, quality standards, and first-party software being the main focus. Nintendo changed video games from a risky product to a closed, reliable system, which lowered the risk for both customers and stores. This way of doing things defined the industry for over 10 years. The Master System, on the other hand, was a test. It was good with technology, but it suffered from messy distribution choices and inconsistent software support. This forced Sega to face its own weaknesses, not having a strong identity, not being very important in the West, and relying on outside partners. These were problems with their structure, not their technology. That's exactly why the Master System was so important. It taught Sega what didn't work, how to build a brand, how to be different, and how to make hardware just one part of a bigger plan. The Mega Drive came from these lessons, not out of nowhere. The rivalry in the 90s wasn't meant to happen. It was the direct result of a mistake that was looked at and fixed. So there's no clear winner in this part of history. There's one company that built the market, and another that learned how to compete in it. The fight between the NES and Master System isn't really about their specs. It's about the choices they made. Nintendo went for a standard, tightly controlled system. The hardware was simple on purpose, but the games were made to use it really well. Sega, on the other hand, chose a more open approach with slightly better tech. But they didn't build a system that could really make that tech shine. What really made the difference was how the games were designed. The NES's limits weren't ignored. They were embraced. Game levels, how things worked, and the pace of play all came from these specific rules, turning them into a kind of language. The Master System had more technical wiggle room, but it didn't have a clear design philosophy. This led to a mixed bag of games, where great ones were rare, not the norm. This generation set a new standard for the industry. It showed how important exclusive games were, the need for long-term support, and having a bigger vision than just one game. It wasn't just about selling consoles, it was about building consistency, trust, and a recognizable brand. In this way, both machines were super important. The NES made video games a successful global business again. The Master System proved there was room for another choice, and that the market didn't have to be controlled by just one company's tech or ideas. In their own ways, they both helped achieve the same thing, making video games a stable, competitive industry ready to grow. And with that, our trip down memory lane comes to an end. How many of these fun facts did you already know? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell for more trips into the world of retro gaming. Thanks for watching Retro Legends, and we'll see you in the next video. Stay retro, stay legends!